That was entirely too reckless, Nylea shouted angrily, as I awaited the liquid steel to return to me. Do you have any idea how lucky you are to be alive right now? If that were any regular substance you had landed in, you'd be dead, even with your enhanced physical durability. At least if you had fallen in the armor, even if you were seriously injured, it's unlikely that you would have died altogether. Nylea sighed. If it wasn't for the strength of the king's power, you would have just been a goner. Normal materials and the mucus we produce are different. That's the only reason you're still alive. Okay. Sorry? I replied, still with a myriad of aches and pains. I don't even think you realize how impractical that would have been with any other material. By sheer chance of luck, you were able to capitalize on multiple facets of the king's power and overlap them in order to massively decrease the amount of stress on your body on impact. Maybe it was dumb luck, or maybe it was a sixth sense about the nature of the king's power, something that you're beginning to subconsciously understand, or at least I can hope so, regardless whether you knew it or not. By creating that structure, you stacked multiple facets of the king's power on top of each other. The strength of the 4 iron rods that you created, made of the hardened king's liquid, were strong enough to bear the force of the impact from your body weight in a massively accelerated state. The mucus in its hardened state has an extraordinary ability to rebound impact force. Basically, at the point of impact, rather than absorbing the shock force of whatever hits it in its hardened state, the king's power reflects that impact force right back. Basically, it's as if whatever impacts the armor, the hardened mucus, at the moment of impact, has the force of the impact rapidly absorbed and then instantaneously pushed back out. To explain it simply, if you hit the hardened mucus with a hammer, generating 100 pounds of force per square inch, the armor instantly absorbs 50 pounds per square inch of that force, and in a speed faster than anyone could possibly comprehend, sends that 50 pounds per square inch of force right back, neutralizing the impact altogether. It's as if whatever impacts it is hit by a force of equal measure, like one bullet colliding with another in air. But in actuality, what it's colliding with is its own force. It's simply that the rate at which the hardened material absorbs the impact and reflects it back is faster than the impact itself. This is how the hardened state of the king's power works to protect you from damage. Why it doesn't bow or bend when hit. While that power does have its limitation, its ability to completely nullify impacts is absolutely absurd by most material standards. On top of that, you laced ropes of the gel form of the mucus. This interlacing of ropes is primarily what saved your life. Normally, if you had impacted any other substance, the speed at which you were moving would have been far too great. But the gel form of the king's power works a bit differently than its hardened state. While the hardened state rapidly absorbs and reflects back 50% of the energy that impacts it, up to a certain point, the gel form works by rapidly spreading impact force. What most people don't understand about impacts is that it is essentially a massive amount of kinetic energy. When it hits, one's body is simply unable to take the amount of kinetic energy forced upon it. It cannot absorb that energy, and thus, the only option left is for your body to break, to allow the object to pass, like a bullet sinking into your skin, because it simply can't absorb the kinetic force. But The mucus in its gel state has an astonishing ability to rapidly spread kinetic energy throughout its entire form. To explain, think of that bullet again. Normally, when you're impacted by a bullet, it's the pounds per square inch of force that pushes it into you. The force is simply confined to too small a space for your body to resist it. But the King's power in its gel form rapidly absorbs and then spreads that impact force. So, even if you're hit by a bullet, rather than trying to reflect that energy back, the King's power in its gel form absorbs the maximum amount it possibly can and spreads it over the entire surface area of its gel form. To explain it, imagine mathematics. If the bullet impacts with 100 pounds per square inch of force, and you have 100 square inches of the King's fluid in its gel state, then the impact force is completely spread out evenly amongst it, cutting the impact force. Instead of experiencing 100 pounds per square inch in 1 square inch, it is experienced simultaneously throughout the entire surface area of the gel. This divides the force rather than reflecting it. So, instead, it's only as if you're being hit with 1 pound of force per square inch, because you have 100 square inches of the King's fluid in its gel state. It works by absorbing the force and dividing it evenly amongst the space covered in the King's gel state, mucus. It's this effect, combined with its general elasticity, that kept you from becoming a splatter at the bottom of that elevator shaft. Unlike any normal substance, when you came in contact with it, the gel immediately began absorbing all of the impact force that you were generating, spreading it out over as much surface as it could, and you had countless cables connected in between that little invention of yours, layered and overlapped on top of each other, stretching downward. Each cable you came in contact with acted like a massive system for absorbing the kinetic energy of your fall. So even if a single rope couldn't have absorbed all the kinetic energy, the multiple overlapping ropes were successful, because each rope you impacted fulfilled the same process, dividing the kinetic energy of your fall. Even the effects it would have had on your body were massively divided. Combining that with the space in between for the ropes to actually stretch and give allowed them to separate that impact force even greater than with the gel substance itself. This is what saved your life. If those were any normal human bungee cords, you would have been diced into pieces, because quite simply, other materials simply can't absorb energy like the gel form of the King's power. So basically, you're an idiot. An idiot who got lucky, or had a good instinct. But I would advise you not to take that sort of chance again, Nylea said angrily, explaining the whole situation to me as the armor forged itself around me. Jeez, Nylea, I didn't expect to get a lesson on the King's power right now, but I suppose knowing this stuff is helpful nonetheless. But right now, I think it's about time that we get out of here, I said as the armor finished its last touches, completely forming as I replaced the orb with the symbiote inside of it back into my chest piece. 10 stories should be short enough drop for the armor to take it. With that, I jumped back down the shaft, falling the 10 stories to the base floor, slamming into the concrete. There was already a fair amount of rubble and damage from that little contraption of mine impacting, bits of concrete and rubble scattered about. So when I impacted, it kicked up quite a bit of dust and strained my legs a bit. but it worked like a charm. With the armor, I was fine.